Luis Alfredo Garavito, born on the 25th of January, 1957, in Geneva, Quindío, Colombia. Garavito's home life was a tumultuous one. His father, Manuel, had drinking habits, a tendency to cheat on his wife, and had violent tendencies. His mother was known to be an aggressive woman, and the two fought frequently. These frequent conflicts left Luis and his 3 brothers and 3 sisters largely neglected. Garavito's father would engage in many violent acts against his family. He would beat his mother many times over the years. Luis would attempt to defend his mother, but ended up on the receiving end of savage physical abuse as well. The spontaneity of Manuel's physical abuse was frequent enough that Luis and his siblings would hide when he got home from work. Garavito recalled in an interview of a time where his father strapped him to a tree and beat him with a machete casing for trying to defend his mother. Garavito's father also forced him to sleep in the same bed. It's alleged that he may have been sexually abused. Adding to this abuse, his father forbade him for having friends or any girlfriends, adding to his isolation and loneliness. At school, he didn't fare much better. He had great difficulties with learning, and was teased by the other kids at school for his learning difficulties and timid nature. He ended up isolating himself at school and played alone during recess. He ended up leaving school in 1968, when he was still a child at around 11 or 12 years old, at his father's insistence to make money for the family. Garavito's immense suffering continued, being sexually abused not only by his father, but one of his father's friends, who was their neighbor and the owner of a local drugstore. The methods of abuse his father's friend had included binding him to a bed and him, burning him with candles, and cutting him with razor blades, among other insidious acts I won't mention here. After this incident, Garavito allegedly killed and cut open 2 birds, supposedly out of frustration, perhaps out of a sense of helplessness and anger. He also began to abuse his sibling. The only thing I wanted at that moment is to have killed myself. Then I see 2 little birds and I stoned them. I took the little birds, opened them, and tore them to pieces. That was after my rape. I was very sorry. I didn't know how I did it. While sleeping, I took my younger siblings and took off their clothes, and without them knowing, I fondled them. But my dad wouldn't let me have a girlfriend, and I had to hide all those things that happened to me. Apparently, Garavito became particularly withdrawn and aggressive, at least according to those who knew him. He thought that his family wouldn't believe his stories of abuse at the hand of their neighbor, so he kept it to himself. He also had a very hard time in his romantic life, most likely due to the horrible experiences he had as a child. Much like his father, Garavito eventually developed a drinking problem. It is during his adolescence where he truly began his life of terrible atrocities. In 1972, he attempted to rape a 5-year-old boy but was caught by his mother and subsequently kicked out of home for a brief time. Again in 1973, he attempted to rape a 6-year-old boy only to be caught by the authorities. Garavito's father kicked him out for, quote, homosexual behavior. Garavito's life up until this point had caused him to have antisocial tendencies. While he found stable work as a young man, he often fought with his co-workers. These confrontations sometimes ended in physical altercations. His romantic life didn't fare well either. Drinking problems and a horrible temper led Garavito to physically abuse the women he was with, oftentimes over insignificant things. It seemed though Garavito wished to turn his life around, however. He began attending AA meetings in 1978 and converted to Pentecostalism and frequently attended his local church. He also reportedly saw a psychiatrist every now and then. It seemed that Garavito genuinely wanted to improve his life, to move on from the horrible upbringing and experiences he had as a child. Things were very difficult for him, however, and after being fired from his job at a bakery, he attempted to end his own life. It was evident that Garavito suffered from various mental health problems such as depression, believing his life was worth nothing. He had been in hospital on more than one occasion for psychiatric treatment, as he showed symptoms of psychosis and bulimia, and was prescribed antipsychotic medications. Unfortunately, none of these treatment methods appeared to work, and this is where the sinister seeds planted so many years ago began to bear fruit. Between the years of 1980 and 1999, Garavito would go on to rape, torture, and murder a confirmed 193 children and is suspected of many more. Most of his victims were found unclothed and showed signs of extensive torture. I won't go into the details of some of the things he did, for they were unspeakable. He was eventually caught on April 22nd, 1999. Confessions were not the only source of evidence the authorities got from him, however. They also obtained physical evidence from various crime scenes, most notably DNA evidence. He is currently serving a life sentence in a maximum security prison in the department of El Cesar in Colombia. Perhaps the most shocking, appalling thing about all of this, however, is that he will be eligible for parole in 2023. Pedro Alonso Lopez, born in Venadillo, Colombia, 1948, was one of 13 children in an impoverished household. His mother was a prostitute, and her occupation was practiced in the house, where Pedro bore witness to it. This would have no doubt affected Lopez as a child. Lopez's mother was aggressive by temperament and frequently punished him, often taking unreasonable measures. He was kicked out of home for attempting to molest one of his sisters. Being homeless at such a young age left Pedro vulnerable. He scavenged for food, and he found himself the victim of several rapes over the years, which no doubt played a role in molding his character into the monster we know today. Eventually, he was found by an American couple who decided to take him in and adopt him. Finally, some peace, hot meals, and a warm bed. A new life, new school, new environment. Everything seemed to be going well for young Pedro, until one day, he was molested by a teacher at his school. He ran away to be on the streets again, and of course, having no money meant he had to steal. Food, possessions, anything. He decided to steal a car one day, which landed him in prison for 7 years, during which he was brutally gang-raped by multiple inmates. Having had enough, he hunted them down one by one and killed them. It's thought that this event further changed him, where he once felt helpless and powerless, to feeling like he had some kind of agency and power. After his eventual release from prison, he traveled across northwest South America, committing crimes in not only Colombia, but Ecuador before eventually arriving in Peru, where he would target street urchin girls from indigenous areas. He would gain their trust and lure them away, rape them and strangle them. This carried on for some time before he was caught and subsequently deported from Peru. From there, he went to Ecuador. Lopez continued his rampage, until one day he attempted to abduct a 12-year-old girl, only for the girl's mother to scream. Local merchants caught Lopez and held him down until the authorities arrived. While he was detained, Lopez refused to cooperate with the authorities, choosing to remain completely silent. While he was imprisoned, the Ecuadorian authorities placed an undercover police officer in the same cell as him. After building some rapport, Lopez confessed his grisly crimes. He confessed to killing over 200 girls in Ecuador, tens in Peru, and many in Colombia. I lost my innocence at age of 8, so I decided to do the same to as many girls as I could. He directed the authorities to the remains of 53 victims, with eventual confirmation of a total 110 in Ecuador. Lopez was convicted of murder and sentenced to 16 years in prison, which was the maximum sentence in Ecuador at the time. He was released from prison 2 years earlier than his full sentence, in 1994 for good behavior. He was deported to Colombia, where he was detained as an illegal immigrant. He was declared insane by the Colombian authorities and couldn't make a case against him for his crimes, so they placed him in a psychiatric institution. He was eventually released in 1998 under the condition that he reported to the authorities every now and then. Lopez completely disregarded this condition, however. His last public sighting was in September of 1999, while at the National Civil Registry to renew his citizenship card. He has never been seen since. He is suspected of a number of crimes across Colombia, but has never been found, and remains a fugitive to this day. I couldn't find too much information on this one, despite searching extensively. Nevertheless, let's explore this twisted individual. Javed Iqbal, born 1961, was one of 8 children. He lived in Lahore, Punjab, Pakistan, and attended Government Islamia College as a young man. He also started a steel recasting business. and lived with other young men in a villa located in Shadbag, which was generously purchased by his father, who was a successful businessman. All seems pretty normal so far, although Javid did exhibit some behavioral problems. Soon, people started to go missing, young boys in particular. Now, during those times it wasn't uncommon for boys to run away from home, for various reasons. Furthermore, this was in 1999, during which a hostile military coup was staged to take over the government. This created economic instability and civil unrest. Around this time period, boys would go missing. A boy goes missing on his way to school, another returning home from a workshop. Boys in Lahore kept disappearing, and this continued for several months. One of Pakistan's most popular newspapers, the Daily Jang, received a letter one day in December 1999. In it, a disgruntled Javid Iqbal confessed to raping and killing 100 boys off the streets. He went into great, visceral detail, recalling his crimes. He would rape them, strangle them with his bare hands, dismember them, and dissolve the pieces into vats of hydrochloric acid to dispose of the evidence. Authorities searched Iqbal's residence. Inside was the stuff of nightmares. They found bloodstains on the walls and floor, and 2 vats of the aforementioned hydrochloric acid, with partially dissolved chunks of human flesh inside, along with a note stating that they were deliberately left out in the open for authorities to find. What was Iqbal's motive for committing such heinous acts? Well, according to one source, he was infuriated at the authorities for arresting him for an act of sodomy against a young boy earlier in the decade. Apparently, the Pakistani authorities beat him whilst he was detained. I was so badly beaten that my head was crushed, my backbone broken, and I was left crippled. I hate this world, Iqbal told the newspaper. Supposedly, his mother had to witness it, and it made her very upset before she died of a heart attack. My mother cried for me. I wanted 100 mothers to cry for their children. Javid Iqbal was subsequently apprehended, tried and sentenced to death, with the judge stating, "You will be strangled to death in front of the parents whose children you killed. Your body will then be cut into 100 pieces and put in acid, the same way you killed the children." However, the sentence was never carried out, as the Interior Minister at the time stated that Pakistan was a signatory of the Human Rights Council, and such punishments were forbidden. He was found dead shortly after in his prison cell. Some sources say that there was possible evidence of murder. However, his death was officially ruled out as suicide. Thus, the life of a hate-filled man drew to a close.